In thinking about what I wanted to focus on with you this Yom Kippur, a lot of different thoughts came to my mind. I thought about some things I had read in the Jerusalem Post. I remembered some online stuff that Patrice had printed for me to read. I recalled some articles I read on the plane to Berlin. So given all that, these are truly scattered thoughts across the internet and across the Atlantic, in fact. They are potentially scattered. But scattered thoughts which I hope I can successfully weave together into a somewhat coherent picture for Yom Kippur. I've tentatively titled these thoughts, Faith and Love and Yom Kippur, which I hope should be somewhat puzzling. Faith and Love and Yom Kippur. I read on a blog by a Jewish author the following comments that he made concerning his faith, and I thought they would be helpful as we begin to focus tonight. He says, faith is a private issue. At least I consider it to be one. I consider myself a Jewish writer, even if my characters frequently are not Jewish. In the same way, I guess, that I consider myself a Jewish man, even if I don't often attend shul. I felt sheepish this week when I admitted to someone that I pray each night. My prayer is improvised and asks for nothing. It wasn't always this way. I prayed every night for as long as I can remember, at least since my bar mitzvah in Israel some 27 years ago. But until recently, I would ask God for favors. Nothing extravagant, mind you, nor even of a material nature. But my prayer was a homemade mix of thanks and request. It was a way of expressing my personal feelings of belief and appeal and doubt and gratitude. But recently, he goes on to say, as my own comprehension of my faith increased, I realized that I had serious doubts about a few things. For example, it struck me as unlikely that God involves himself with the daily minutiae of every single life on the planet. That an omnipotent creator of life would find himself shackled with that duty seemed improbable. Somehow it struck me as being beneath him. He went on to say, all the same, I do believe in God, and also that Judaism is closest to what my conception of God is. And so I decided to keep on praying. But just not to ask God for anything. The thing is, I truly am profoundly thankful to God for all the blessings that I have received in my life, beginning with the gift of life itself. Now, whether my not asking for good things to happen to me is subconsciously intended to bring me brownie points with God is something I cannot answer. But I do feel the need to give thanks, and also the need not to feel hypocritical by asking for things when I have doubts that God would answer me. Now, that is not to say I haven't broken my little rule now and again, that I haven't taken up that mantle of hypocrisy every so often. But I do so for my 3-year-old son. He has been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, and I have prayed and will continue to pray for his health and comfort. It does seem to me to be a little hypocritical. However, it seems that a little hypocrisy in the service of fatherhood may just get a bit of a divine pass, but who knows? The author's refreshingly honest, transparent blog is a gentle reminder to us that faith, properly understood, is multidimensional. It can, in fact, I will say it should be based on facts and evidence. And in the course we teach called Apologetics at the Yeshiva, we deal with that. So yes, it can and should be true, based on facts and evidence, but it also has elements of feeling and experience as well. One author calls this latter aspect the realm of existential needs. Now, what is he talking about? The realm of existential needs. Well, he goes on in his book to describe for us the fact that something in the biblical narrative or story resonates deep within us as it connects to one or more of our heart's longings, and so it satisfies us in a way nothing else can. The author calls these existential needs. And then he goes on to say that we all have them, whether or not we are always aware of them, and whether or not we always like it. Now, some of these existential needs are self-directed. Some are directed towards others. For example, we have the need to love and be loved, to do good things, and to delight in the goodness of others, to feel cosmic security, and to expand the realm of justice, to receive forgiveness when we lose our way, and yet to admire those who live morally praiseworthy lives, to absorb the beauty of nature, and yet connect with those whom we love. And at a deeper level, he points out we need to feel like our lives have meaning here and now, but we also need the hope of living beyond the grave. And we need to know that in the afterlife, we'll finally be free from this life's problems. Belief in God is further justified because it satisfies these very intimate and inmost needs. Now, some may reply that not everyone feels such existential needs. However, people can have existential needs even if they don't feel them, even if they're not aware of them. Look, we all realize this, perhaps more about our own personal lives, but perhaps about the lives of others as well, that we're not always tuned in very well to our emotions. Not as well as we could be, perhaps not as well as we should be. And in our society, there are both cognitive and non-cognitive obstacles that stand in the way. So the question may very well become how to arouse awareness of our needs. And interestingly, circumstances can often jolt even the most hard-hearted among us to recognize what we sense is our utter dependence on God and our existential need for God. The author had a very interesting statement that he made, and I'm going to quote it to you. It's 2 sentences long. He said, when our feelings are turned off or are insulated by layers of protective defense, life loses something precious. We trudge on, accomplishing plenty, but appreciating little. You see, emotions ennoble life's tragedies as God finds our hearts just when we need Him most. We need the promise of forgiveness when we're trapped in our shortcomings, what we call sin and what we confess during Yom Kippur. We need the hope of heaven when we're battling disease and death. And we need the presence of others to assure us that we're loved in the face of unwanted loss. And it is just this feeling component that highlights, let me suggest, part of the genius or insight that is provided for us in Yom Kippur. A very old man lay dying in his bed. Suddenly he smelled the aroma of his favorite chocolate chip cookies wafting up the stairs from the kitchen. So he gathered what remaining strength he had, lifted himself from the bed. Leaning against the wall, he slowly made his way out of the bedroom and forced himself down the stairs, hanging onto the railing with both hands. Gasping when he arrived in the kitchen, he leaned against the doorframe, gazed into that kitchen, and if it were not for his agony, he would have thought that he had found himself in heaven. Because there, spread on the kitchen table, were literally hundreds of his favorite chocolate chip cookies. Was it heaven? Or was it one final act of love from his devoted wife, seeing to it that he left the world a happy man? Well, summoning up one great final effort, he threw himself toward the table. His withered hand was shaking as it made its way to a cookie at the edge of the table, when suddenly out of nowhere it was smacked by a spatula from his wife. "Stay out of those," she said. "They're for your funeral."
Oh, ouch.
Oh well, guess that was the wrong feeling. I'll let you recover from that for a minute. And yet our sages, the rabbis of old, remind us that pleasant feelings are appropriate for Yom Kippur. If you read in the Talmud, you will find in the tractate that deals with the fast days the following statement. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said, listen to this, there were no greater holidays for Israel than the 15th day of the month of Av and Yom Kippur. Not going to deal with the first part of that, but listen to what he says. There were no greater holidays for Israel than the 15th day of the month of Av and Yom Kippur, when the young women of Jerusalem would go out dressed in borrowed white dresses and would dance in the vineyards. There again you see the repetition of white again. And what would they say? Young man, lift up your eyes and decide which maiden you shall choose for yourself. And as it also says, go out and look, daughters of Zion, upon King Solomon and upon the crown with which his mother crowned him, on the day of his wedding and on the day of the rejoicing of his heart. It's a text from the Song of Songs, or the Song of Solomon, as it's often called. In conjunction with Yom Kippur, notice what the ancient rabbis said. Our sages ordered the following thing. Basically, get married, have children. Remember that we still are God's chosen children. Intriguing. It's almost a wow. Change that. It is a wow. The Song of Songs and Yom Kippur. Love, marriage, and Yom Kippur. Now, at some Jewish weddings, the bride will give the groom a ring and recite the verse that is quite familiar from the Song of Songs. Ani ledodi v'dodi li. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. Let me suggest that the significance of this verse for marriage is all too often missed. It is spoken by the woman in the Song of Songs. It's a remarkable expression of equality and mutuality in the relationship between men and women. In the biblical text, the man and the woman are on the same level. He is hers, just as she is his. No more and no less. When love is involved, as it is in Song of Songs, male and female must be equals. And, listen carefully, this is all the more remarkable when we consider that traditional Jewish understanding extended the meaning of that book and interpreted that book as being an expression of the relationship between God and Israel. The male figure, of course, representing God, and the female representing the Jewish people. It indicates that if we are to attempt to imagine the relationship between God and Israel, there is no better way than to compare it to the love of a man and a woman. And that is part of what the Sephardi tradition at Shavuot picks up. And we do that here in this synagogue when we go through the renewal of the vows. It is part of what the covenant that God gave to us at Mount Sinai was all about. It was not just a covenant, but a wedding covenant, a ketubah. And it is exactly what the Haftorah from the middle of the month of Elul, that's the month we just concluded in preparation for these days, Isaiah 54 verse 5 says. It says, your Creator is your husband. This is remarkably daring, let me suggest, since there is no way in which God and Israel can be said to be truly equal. Yet the relationship pictured is a mutual one. So the Torah itself often uses that terminology, as in fact do many of the prophets. And what the sages do, the rabbis of old do, they adopted that reinterpretation of the Song of Songs. Now we too refer to God in one understanding as the beloved, Dod or Dodi. We do that Friday night when we sing out, Lecha Dodi, come my beloved. Where in a sense we ask God to usher in the Messianic era, the time of the ultimate Shabbat of peace and of restoration, the time of the Messiah himself. Interestingly, the month Elul, the month that has just preceded us, is also connected to the Song of Songs verse. The sages of old indicated that the name of this month, which is devoted to the preparation period for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that this month actually consists of the first letters of the verse's words. Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Lamed, Elul. Ani ledodi, ledodi li. And they also pointed out that the psalm that's read each day of Elul contains the word luleh, which is Elul backwards. As one author put it, Rabbi Ruvain Hammer, I am beloved, I am my beloved, and my beloved is mine. In other words, let me get it right at the beginning. The verse can therefore mean that to attain forgiveness and atonement, we rely on the fact that I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. In other words, we rely on the closeness and mutuality of our relationship to God, end quote. Now, connecting Elul to this particular verse gives this time of year, or it should give this time of year, a different feeling than might have been expected. After all, Elul leads up to the Yamim Noraim, the days of awe, the days we are just concluding today and tomorrow. And I would suggest that there is probably little or nothing remotely romantic about Yamim Noraim and Yom Kippur, not as usually conceived of. We're standing, as it were, before the great King, the very creator of the cosmos. And yet, understanding this, the sages had the audacity to address him as Dodi, as my beloved. So as we enter Yom Kippur, as we encounter the Creator himself, we should not allow the seriousness and the solemnity to overwhelm us. Rather, we should approach him and the day with the knowledge that, as Judaism teaches, the very God who rules the universe, the God whom we describe and sing to as Adon Olam, is the God who's ready to accept our repentance with love and is ready to be in a relationship with us that is close and intimate, even though in reality we are far from equal. If we aspire and commit ourselves to be worthy of that relationship, we will find God to be a loving and willing partner. As most of you know by now, my favorite theologian, although he's not Jewish, is C.S. Lewis. There's a dynamite scene from the book called The Magician's Nephew. Let me try to set it for you, and then I will quote that scene to you, hopefully in a way that might be meaningful. The scene is the very creation of the world known as Narnia. And the text reads, that's the land that all these chronicles take place in. Here's what Lewis says. Then two wonders happened at the very same moment. One was that great lion's deep voice was suddenly joined by other voices, more voices than you could possibly count. They were in harmony with it, but far higher up the scale. Cold, tingling, silvery voices. The second wonder was that the blackness overhead, all at once, was suddenly blazing with stars. They didn't come out gently one by one as they do in a summer evening. One moment there had been nothing but darkness. At the next moment, 1,000 points of light leaped out. Single stars, constellations, and planets, brighter and bigger than any in our world. The new stars and the new voices began at exactly the same time. If you had seen it, if you had heard it, you would have felt quite certain that it was the stars themselves which were singing, and that it was the first voice, the deep one, the great lion's voice, which had made them appear and made them sing. Glory be, said the cabby. I would have been a better man all my life if I had known there were things like this. Well, friends, now you know. So go and be. Take the next minute or so for a time of reflection and response and quiet.